Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ash to get our program going.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you guys can join us for partnering with your CFO and getting your projects approved. Next slide. First, we'll have our second presenter is Kent Townsend, Executive Vice President, CFO, and Treasurer of Capital Federal. Townsend joined Capital Federal in 1984 after serving many financial related positions, including financial planning and analyst officer and controller. He was promoted to Executive Vice President, Chief Financial Officer, and Treasurer of Capital Federal in 2005. He played a pivotal role in guiding Capital Federal through becoming both a partially public and then fully public company. We have Ken Scott, First Vice President, Director of Capital Federal. Scott has been employed with Capital Federal for 13 years and is currently First Vice President, Director of Capital Federal Savings Bank. His responsibilities include facilities, security purchasing, fleet and insurance. Prior to Capital Federal, Scott spent 19 years at Westar Energy, now Evergy, managing their facilities and security and involvement in several company mergers, acquisitions, and I did not know what that is. I'm so sorry. And we have Anna Grather, a facility manager at Seagate Technology. Grather currently works for Seagate Technology with a primary focus on how a facility supports an organization's mission through facility planning, preventative maintenance, energy efficiency, and addressing issues correctly the first time. She received her CFM in 2009, a lead GA designation in 2011 with the current focus on sustainability and the impact of built environment on climate change. We have Josh Woods, the Director of Downtown KC Service Center at GSA. Woods has served as the Director of the Downtown Kansas City Service Center for the GSA Public Building Service since July of 2018. He is responsible for planning, budgeting, and directing all facility management functions for the Richard Bolling Federal Building and the Charles E. Whitaker U.S. Courthouse, along with 56 leased locations across the KC Metro. So Josh, I'll give it away to you.
Thanks, Ash. Good morning. Joining today. Like Ash said, my name is Josh Woods. I work for the General Services Administration here in downtown Kansas City. And I just want to take a few moments before we kick into the real meat of the presentation from the other three presenters and just kind of create a little connection between what the topic is today and an educational opportunity with IFMA. This comes from a little personal experience that I've had. I joined IFMA last year or I started my journey with IFMA last year through the educational piece of it in pursuit of my facility management professional designation. And then it ultimately led to me joining the KC chapter. And so I really sought the FMP for the educational piece of it and just really expanding my tool belt, knowledge, skills, and abilities. This is a course, or it's a designation program that has 4 different courses. The first one's operations and maintenance. The second is leadership and strategy. The third is project management. And the fourth and final, which is a significant topic for today, is the finance and business course. Today's program, which you're going to hear from some incredible experts in the industry, revolves around the importance of getting projects funded and is a direct correlation to the business and finance course within the FMP designation. Finance and business topics and terminology can seem daunting at times, but I assure you, you don't have to be a finance expert. You don't have to have a business degree, but I do, through experience, I have learned that it's extremely important to understand how projects do get funded and how your CFO office works. And it's also important too to make the CFO or someone in the CFO's office your next best friend at work. It really makes things a whole lot smoother when you're trying to get projects funded. At a minimum, with those who hold the purse and carry the power of the funding. This course, Business and Finance, covers many different topics, which include fundamentals of accounting, financial management and budgeting, financial statements, business case writing to fund projects. I'm sure Ken and Kent will get into a little bit more on what they want to see when it's time to fund a project. project. And as an FM, it's really important to have the details and the data to support your position. It also covers financial reporting and then the procurement and contracting piece in the FM organization. So I want to encourage anyone who has interest in learning more about the FMP and specifically this finance and business course to please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or anyone within the education resource to discuss that with as well. There's extreme value in the FMP, personally and professionally, and I hope you'll take a look at it and see if it's right for you. I think you'll really enjoy the 4 different courses and the format that has been put in place to earn that designation as the FMP. So with that, I want to turn it over to the extremely talented Ken Scott to kick us off with today's presentation.
Thank you, Josh. We appreciate it, and thank KC IFMA for hosting what we do at Capitol Federal to get projects approved. I'm honored to have Kent Townsend with me sharing the screen. We're going to just kind of alternate back and forth on various topics, and you know, I'm just so blessed to have Kent and his team behind and supporting my team with all that we do. So as we go through the processes today, we have shared some forms that were sent out earlier today. Kent's going to talk about some of those forms and some of our processes. You're welcome to take those with you. You're welcome to alter them. I would suggest you work that in with your accounting and finance takeaways, and Anna's going to provide some additionals. As we go through our processes today, we believe that we're pretty good at what we do, although it's ever changing, and where we can add efficiencies, we do. But just know that when I started in 2007, we had nothing like this in place. There was some high-level forecasting. I don't think facilities and security had anything related to what we're going to share today. But so this is a work in progress for any company. And if you're just starting from scratch, please do not be overwhelmed. We've worked on this for a decade, probably a little longer. At the heart of what we do for getting projects approved is our forecasting. And that is a 3-year look ahead that we work with finance and accounting, really with Kent's finance group and his team. We project 3 years in advance on all capital projects, 3 years in advance on all expenses. And Kent's team does this with all of the major business units. Our goal is to capture all revenues and expenses related to what the company is doing. Probably a key to forecasting is the communication. Communication, especially with Kent's group, I would share, nobody likes surprises. And the higher up in the organization that you go, that your message is heard, the less those surprises are appreciated. So the goal for us is to communicate with our executive team, to communicate with Kent and his team, so that when we are presenting or we've got something that we need to get funded, that in most times, you know, our executives have seen this for several years.
Yeah, so Ken, can I jump in a little bit here?
Yes, please do.
So every September, we have a fiscal year end that ends on 9/30 or begins October 1st. And we bring Ken's group, our IT group, our HR group, and our marketing group together and ask them to give us their outlook for 3 years. And to Ken's point, I think what's happened over the last few years is as Ken and your profession really manages, you know, 54 facilities for us, right? And all, knowing what's going on in all of those is very important. And so Ken manages that well. Well, he shares that information with the executive team in the process. And so to Ken's point, we're not surprised when something's coming up. Even if Ken sees something a couple years down the road, we go ahead and plan on our 2022 or 2023. I'd add to that we also update that once a quarter. So what happens is once a quarter, things change. As things change, priorities have to be adjusted, and Ken's group will turn around and readjust those things so that we can stay within our budget for 2021, but we still know these projects need to get done. So they're always balancing out the priorities that need to happen. I would say that communication is probably the best thing that happens through this process, because it's not done in isolation. We bring everybody together. We bring not just Ken and the folks of us who have to approve, our budget or forecast that goes to the board, but we bring the other departments together too. So everybody kind of has a sense of what everybody else is doing. And I think that helps as well, because what ends up happening in that conversation is if a discussion comes up about a branch, and our IT department knows they need to plan to support that branch with IT, and how do they make sure that that's in their projections. It's a very collaborative effort among everybody and all the stakeholders in the company. So it's not, I really think we've done a good job of not doing things in isolation. And then the project approval is something that's vetted. It's reviewed by a lot of people, and we may talk about that again here in a bit, but kind of created a form. So my background actually in working with being a public company, if you go out to the SEC website and you pull down a 10K or a 10Q, their version of it's not very many pages long. It's like, talk about this, talk about this, talk about this. So one of the forms that Ken provided is where we seek project justification. And if we put all the little boxes at the end out of it, it'd probably be 1 page long, but it's, why are we doing this? What's the benefit to the organization? And then they can have as much narrative as they want to have to help support that project. We identify who are all the stakeholders in every project. And then that way, everybody, not only does it make the budgeting easier, it makes it easier to know what's coming so that the resources are available for Ken and his group. But it also puts the other people on notice, even if it's my department who's got to pay the bills, who's got to set up the depreciation, who's got to set up the assets. Everybody's been put on notice, and they know when these things are going to happen. And I think that so I can't say that we forecast, we communicate, and we obtain project approval. Those three things are happening together, and they're regularly updated throughout the course of each fiscal year.
And to Kent's point about the project approval, that's done in our company for anything over 100 grand or anything that makes an impact on a substantial impact on the company. And then that is updated monthly to the executives and some other core individuals.
Yeah, and that's kind of important too, because it probably doesn't happen as much in facilities as other areas, but the point about if it's so let's say that we didn't spend a lot of money, and so card readers, right, Ken? That's been something that's come up. It didn't cost a lot of money, certainly didn't cost $100,000.
No.
But it impacted everybody in our building. It impacted probably other locations as well. And so we discussed that, and it involved our IT department. And so we pulled everybody together so that there were no surprises when those things roll out and somebody shows up to open up a branch or something like that, or to walk into a building and they can't get into where they need to go. So it's been a good process. So we talked a little bit about the forms. We put in here ALCO, and I don't know that anybody outside of banking really knows that, but if you do, great. But that would be our asset liability committee, and that's the group, sort of the executive team that manages the balance sheet of the bank. So we set the rates for loans and deposits, and what's our balance sheet strategy, like what do we want the mix of the assets and liabilities to be. But that's also where we come in and have these projects submitted for approval, not just Ken's, but the marketing plan has to be approved. IT's projects over $100,000 get approved in that process as well. And then we consolidate those projects into a shorter report so that we have a business plan that our board can look at should they want to. That's available for them, and it's available for, in our organization, all first vice presidents and up. So that would be any senior officer up can know what's going on. And then we talked about the forecasting. The one thing about the forecasting is that we actually worked with each group. So what we get submitted works for Ken, but might not work for HR. But at the end of it all, we developed these individual templates of gathering information. And then we, in the finance group, take that and run it essentially through a filter that puts it in a format that our software can use when we run our forecast. So we're not forcing other people to work our way. One of the things we've tried to do is figure out how can we let Ken work the way he works, submit us your information, and then. And so I think that I don't know about other organizations, but myself and my team will very much look at the fact that Ken is our customer. I think everybody within Capital Federal views somebody as a customer. Ken and I don't deal with customers at the teller window. We make sure that ultimately those tellers or those customer service representatives or those loan officers have every customer, their customer, the frontline customers experience as good as it can be. And so we really kind of take that philosophy throughout the organization. And I've been here 37 years. And I would say it's been that way all along. It took a different form when technology was not what we have today. But that kind of communication happened regularly. Is this me or you, Ken?
You, sir.
Okay, so one advantage I would say that a bank may have in this regard, although I think communication should overcome this. We talked an awful lot about laying a foundation of good communication, putting all the information out there, being very transparent. I would say that internally, everything that we can be transparent on, we are transparent on. And being public, we report to stockholders. We're regulated, so we have a couple of different banking regulators in the Fed and the OCC. And then every day we are looking at our cash position, and I'm sure every business is doing that. But all of our projections involve all of our projects. So whether we need to be writing a check for Ken to pay a vendor because of a branch that's being built or IT, we are always kind of consolidating all that information into one spot so that we know not just our cash position, but the expectations or the near-term encumbrances on that. And the other thing that we update our forecast, which is once a month, is we actually run a daily cash projection for 365 days, and then we consolidate that back. We look at that based on maturity dates of CDs. We look at it on, payment due dates on loans and all of our securities and borrowings. And So we've taken the time to invest on the back end as well, so that we're able to actually look at Ken's needs, or anybody else's needs for that matter, to make sure that we have the cash at the time and at a level that we need to have. The other thing is, as a bank, we have, 50 plus locations. They all have to have cash. So that kind of goes beyond just working with facilities, but we make sure, and facilities helps us with cash deliveries, right? So you work with our vendors and you do all of that for us. And that's how we share that information, so that we make sure that we have those resources in place for all of our customers that come in and need those withdrawals as well. So one of the things that I think we have gotten really good work from, but Ken's group especially, is the difference between a capital expense and a direct expense and depreciation. We don't look at, so one of the things, if we back up in our minds just a minute to our very early discussion, that we have this form that Ken's group or any other group would submit saying, here's the project justification, here's what it costs. The other thing that form does is say, what's the 5-year impact on our financial statements for that? So from the very beginning, we know how much of it is a capital expense, but we know how much of it's going to impact our financial statements. And then we can use that to, at a high level, plug into what's the impact on our earnings, what's the impact on, given that most of our assets are in loans and securities, and facilities is a smaller part of that. But the expense that comes from those facilities really drives a lot of our financial results. And so we are able to see the impact of that. And so we allow them the opportunity to say, we're going to build a branch for $1 million. Here's the depreciation expense. But they also come in then with the direct expenses of those branches. For example, utilities. They come in with property tax estimates. They come in with the IT depreciation. So they're going to put in, technology and depreciate that. We're going to put in, we're going to have people working in these locations. What's the impact of that? So one of the things that we do is we essentially create a mini financial statement for each project. And what's the impact of that on our financial statements? And I think that what that does is that while we don't do a return on investment calculation, we know the impact of these decisions more on a immediate impact to the income statement or to the balance sheet. But our impact is really measured by how does it impact or help us improve our customer relationships. Whether if it's a branch, how many deposits do we expect to come in? How many loans do we expect to originate? Or if it's a security system, what's the impetus behind that? And how does that improve our ability to stay ahead of bad actors? It's not, sometimes it's more of a compliance type function, but we have to stay ahead of bad actors. We all do. And that's part of our justifications from time to time.
Okay, so we've taken you down the kind of the road of some of our processes. It goes back to, getting everybody on the same page. It goes back to setting the goals and making sure everybody understands the goals. It's just not my goals. It's not just Kent's goals. We have to support the retail side of our company. We have to support the lending side of our company. We went through a merger a couple of years ago, which put us, we were already in the commercial banking business, but it put us more front. Picked up a trust department. We have to, as a company, understand what those functions do, what our opportunities are, and how we support those. And that's all of us getting on the same page, all of us supporting the same goal. It's important for you to understand the type of company you have. Capital Federal is a privately held company, i.e. we're traded on NASDAQ. All of you out there are welcome to go out and buy our stock and become our boss. Our call letters are CFFN. So, that's important to know as you're developing your opportunities here. Trust among your partners. And we have great trust between our team and Kent's team at all levels. So today you're seeing my face and Kent's face, but probably the heavy lifting, I probably work more with Kent's direct reports times 10 than we do together. And my team works with his team directly. So, we're not stuck on, well, you're at this level of the company or you're on this level, so, you have to deal. It's like, no, you go to wherever that person can deal with your problem. And that's how we solve problems fast. Honest. So I'm not worried if we don't spend all of our budget. I'm not worried if we have money left over. In fact, many times that is our goal. If we can push a roof over another year, we can do something another year, we move that around in our forecast on the budget. I'm not worried that if, 1 year we have 10 million in construction, the next year we have 5, that 5 is a threshold. We know what our processes are. We trust each other. We have track records together, and we like that relationship. Let's talk about forthcoming. Everybody has opportunities for improvements or for failures, and I'm going to share one of my. So we as a company, we decided that we were going to remodel our home office. That was a project of construction only of somewhere around 20 million, plus furnishings and everything else that goes with that. Probably a third of the way into the project, we had bids come in at our penthouse replacement, which is all the mechanical, major electrical, boilers, chillers, etc. We had a budget of $800,000 to replace that equipment. Our low bid was $1.8 million. That's a low bid. We have $1 million bust. So I walk down to Kent's office. We've got a problem here. Of course, using his leadership skills, he goes, you need to go tell John. And John is our president, CEO, and chairman. So I do. So I make an appointment. I also, before I go to see John, I come up with 3 or 4 scope options that would reduce our bust probably to maybe $500,000. It probably is about as low as we got. So I scenario, told him what had happened, shared the options to make changes. But he said, we've undertaken this investment. We're working on a 20 to 30 year plan here. Let's not take shortcuts. Well, I'm not pleased that we have a $1 million bust. What I am pleased is that we have a solution going forward. We know where we're at. We're going to adjust. We'll adjust our budgets. We're going to complete the project. And we did do that. So I certainly, as somebody working for our executives, appreciated the relationship ability to share. That's why I was not concerned, nor was I afraid to share that, nor did I even think about covering it up or blaming somebody. It was me who hired the architects. I hired the engineers. That makes it my problem. So it's a real key component to moving forward in a big way for all companies.
Yeah, so I think one of our my folks will do any research that Ken needs help with. We don't expect him to go out and, we want him to be an expert in facilities and security and support for our facilities. We don't want him to also have a staff that's going to take care of those one-off questions about, well, where did we spend this money or what did we spend a year ago? So our folks will put together any of the reports that he wants. We'll get vendor history. Doesn't have them, because I also have records management is under me. Our modeling that we do for our forecasts or business operations, we at least once a quarter come out with variance reports so that nobody's surprised. And the other thing that we do in writing, what supports the numbers, so that it's memorialized. Nobody has to remember one story different than another. And that's also what we do back in the very beginning. But the support for that documentation, while it adds accountability, it also removes uncertainty. And we do that all the way through this process. So when Ken gives us his forecast for the next 3 years, we're going to get 3, 4, 5 pages of narrative that goes along with it that talks about why this is the way it is for the next 3 to 5 years. And then when I think audited projects, Ken can talk to that probably better than I can, but there's plenty of inspections, there's plenty of controls. I don't think we hand off the responsibility for any project to anybody else. To Ken's point, and we've all had it, I've had my share too. It's on me. So let's, we get through the projects and we take care of them. And then we also have an internal audit department that will go back through and at least make sure that from a financial control standpoint that we followed all of our internal processes as well.
Mm-hmm. And on the internal audit process, on that project I just referenced that we did $20 million worth, that project actually was a cost plus project, which we're not afraid to do because we are not afraid to share in the risk. Cost plus project, you get to manage 95% of all the costs. We make those contractor books open. We know what their fees are up front. But with that, that project, our internal audit audited that project 3 times, totaling $7.4 million in invoices that were sent to us. They found one error of about $250 on a rental charge that was billed to our job that should have been somebody else's. So they're not an adversary to us. They're another tool that we have available to help us do our job better. So relationships, if there's nothing that you take out of this today besides our forms, take out that relationships are so important in a company of any size. And it's not today, we're talking about facilities and finance and accounting, but it also applies, as Kent has discussed, to IT and HR and marketing. And we meet with our major business units. I meet with those EVPs on a regular basis. They have my cell phone, I have theirs. We are a support group. My team, facility, security, purchasing, fleet, whatever, is in our company. And I ask our team on a regular basis, or it's more like a quote. And what I tell them is like, if given a choice, would our customers who are our employees, would they use us? If they could go outside of our company and they could use somebody else, would they do that? And if we're not doing our job well enough to answer that question is no, they would use us, then we have lots of opportunity for improvement. And that's what we face. That's what our goal is every single day.
Okay, so I see there's some questions in the chat.
There are. So I have a question from Sam. Our fiscal year runs from October 1st to September 30th. Also, besides your 3-year plan, when do you start your yearly operational budgets?
Well, we get quarterly updates, so I sort of feel like they're always fresh. Yeah, Ken's saying, I mean, our IT department's the same way. I mean, I've been working with HR on some changes already, and we've got new updates for March 31st already. So I would say that we don't start and stop. We kind of just keep that fresh for everybody.
Can I just add to that, maybe a little context? I work for a nonprofit organization, so our budgets every year, even though we look at them, we look them on a monthly basis. We have to do month end and do month end recaps every month within facilities, with anybody that's spending money, because our bottom line, of course, is to send as much money as we can to the field for our programs. We want to reach that 80–90%. We want to send as much money towards our cause as we can. So our budgets are really, really scrutinized. But we have to start our annual budgeting like in, let's say, May. Coming up here pretty soon, we'll start in late April or May, and we get together with all the VPs of the various departments to start planning for any potential costs that they might have, any potential changes. And those May, June, and they're due July basically 4th. Then they have to be revised by accounting and then gone over by the executive committee, then put together and sent out to the board of directors so that they can review them in August, so that when they have their annual board meeting in September, they can be approved, because ours are basically approved every September. Our new budget for FY22 or FY23 is approved. And a 3 to 5 year overview is just kind of a review of what might, be forecast that could happen. So it's a little different. I was just kind of curious as if you do it that way, but it doesn't sound like you do. When would you start? I mean, we start in May, so we literally start budgeting here real soon for next year.
So banking regulation, because I think that's kind of important. Most, we actually probably start asking people for that information in August. It's required by the middle of September. We pull it together. We have our meetings in very late September. And our fiscal year ends September 30th. Banking regulation says you have to approve your budget for the next year within the first 90 days of your next year. So we have to have an ending trial balance in order to project the next year, so that we can get the impact of interest rate risk in there on our loans and deposits.
Okay.
So
that's different than us.
Yeah.
And Sam, because we are working on this throughout the entire, it's always, I mean, we can put it together in 30 days. All I'm doing is adjusting for the next quarter.
Yeah, the other thing is that what gets approved doesn't change. So all performance metrics for officers, any departments, whatever, are stay static. What we do with these quarterly updates is just essentially refresh it, saying, okay, this is what's happened to interest rates in the last 3 months. This is now where we think we're going to end up at the end of September. Much of that is driven because we're a public company and being able to respond to investor inquiries and stuff like that.
I think in my 30 years, this actually Thursday is my 30th anniversary here at Children International.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Being a nonprofit versus a profit has always been this strange kind of thought process for me when I work with people that are in the for-profit world, and I'm kind of over here on the nonprofit side, and and there's different thinking. Let's say if I was Julie at H&R Block, or somebody that owns a for-profit company, like let's say Sprint back in the day, and Tina, our thinking is always a little bit different when it comes to budgeting and spending. And even though something might be approved, I could get word from the executive committee, we did approve that, but we forecast our budgets and we hope that our income meets those budgets, because we're pulling sponsorship dollars in. It's not like we know that money's going to be there. And they'll come to me and say, well, sorry, Sam, you're not going to be able to replace that boiler this year. You're going to have to keep it together another year. Just as if when we rebuilt our facility, planning our facility in like 2002 and 3 and did visioning and planning, and then 2008 hit, and that was the year we were going to build the building, and we pushed that off for another 3 or 4 years because of the finances just weren't right for us. So it's kind of there's a real different thinking when it comes to for versus nonprofit thinking from a financial side. At least it always has been very interesting to see the differences for me being a nonprofit director of operations or director of facilities.
Yeah.
All right. Rolling into a question from Julie. Do you hold a slush fund emergency bucket of dollars? And if so, how much percentage of your annual operating budget?
We don't.
No, and I can tell you on my side for the projects I submit, and it doesn't matter what the price is. It could be a $5 million project. It could be a $3 million. We do not set 5% aside. We do not set 10%. We're working with our business partners. We're working with our contracted partners. We say it's going to be $1.5 million. We roll in with $1.5 million. If there are change orders, we update ALCO every month on the change order, what that means, what was the cost, why did it happen. We make our contractors responsible for that. If you have a contingency fund in their own minds, it's like, well, this is part of ours. We just need to figure out how to get it. And in our minds, it's like, no, that's our money. We'll be happy to be fair with you, but we're going to justify all overruns, and we get them.
A couple more questions, and then we'll turn it over to Anna for her portion. How do you source contractors for CAP-Fed projects and competition?
We do it many ways. We rarely go to the street only just for open bid. We have certain timelines that we need to hit. We have certain quality measures we need to maintain. Nobody does all of our work. We have probably a group of 5 to 10 generals that do work for us between Missouri and Kansas, and a lot of the work is cost plus assigned with history. We know where the market needs to be. We've built 20 branches or whatever since I've been there, but sometimes we'll do the one at North Oak. We did a cost plus invite only bid. We had 5 GCs in Kansas City come in, provided quotes for that. Our architect on that job was Gastinger Walker. They evaluated the proposals, and we went forward with that.
Robert Reynolds, what does your capital project prioritization process look like? Committee, board input, level of FM feedback?
I'll start with the forecast. It moves into the current year to date, current month. So we submit the ALCO request. The forecast has been approved by the board at that point, as Kent alluded to, within 90 days from our October 1. We begin, if approved, the project begins. We give timelines, we give updates monthly. And then at the very end, we close the project out. This is our projections. This is what we ended up at, with Kent's team's help, of course. Any other odd things that may have happened or good things that may have happened. And then we start it again. And we may have, I think I've got 6 or 8 projects going right now that are at the ALCO level that we're working on, over 100 grand.
Also in the chat box, Capital Federal is getting a lot of kudos from Becky and Brittany with personal experiences. So make sure you read through those as well. And that looks like the last, yeah.
Thank you.
And
I got Nash, the question that came up in a committee, I think it was a good one. I'd like to hear Kent's response on this. Somebody asked if my finance and accounting department does not want to partner with me, what options or what suggestions would you have to bring them in to the fold?
Yeah, that's kind of a cultural question, I think, a little bit, and it's that's tough. I think it really would require a conversation about, what do I do if I can't partner with you? What does this look like if we don't work together? And I'm assuming that this is identified because it creates strain in a relationship, or things aren't getting done. Maybe it's because of, trying to protect turf. I mean, one of our mantras around here is it's got to be good for the bank. And I don't think anytime any hard decision's been made, it's been about anybody's one department. So if you're having a hard time working with them, I think I'd sit down and say, paint the picture of how good it could be if people work together. And I think the other thing is to Ken's point, this didn't happen overnight for us, right? I mean, we work together well, but the communication has just gotten better and better. And I think in that conversation about how good could it be, lay out the expectations like, hey, we're not going to fix this overnight. So that kind of takes a little bit of the stress off, right? And then I think you can also say, this is what I'm going to do to improve the conversation. And I'm going to share this and this and this. What can you share back? What can you give me in return? And I think that there's a little bit of, if they give nothing, that's fine. But if maybe, I think each party needs to be challenged a little bit on that one.
And Mary, I'm going to do one more quick question that Mary Redmond threw in before I toss it over to Anna. What impact, if any, has COVID had on your processes, expenditures, human resources, such as headcount reductions and infrastructure?
I'll talk at a high level on facilities, and then Kent can finish it up. I can tell you, like everybody on this call, COVID impacted the facilities team unreal. We were hit with challenges we've never seen before. We were hit with scenarios that we'd never encountered before. Going back to relationships, if you did not have good relationships with your vendor partners before COVID, you were in trouble during COVID. Our vendor partners saved our backside day after day after day after day. We never had to say no to Kent. We never had to say no to our business units. We were always there when they needed us. We were working 7 days a week, all hours, day and night, doing whatever it took to get the job done. I think I put 14 projects on hold internally, not that Kent was maybe aware of, but just for our own staff. We did have 2 banks under construction at the time, and we discontinued them. Both sites actually have been hit with COVID. My staff has been exposed to COVID. I have a team that makes all the purchasing. Of course, they're spending money that was not forecasted, which we did. Kent set up a process. We reported to Kent every Monday what our expenditures were for the week prior to.
Yeah, so that was important for us to do. We did take a very risk-based approach to cash management. We upped the amount of cash that we had in our branches for a while. We spent more. I found this sort of interesting because we had this whole conversation about how much it was costing to send people home to work. And from a technology standpoint, it probably cost us about 40% of what our facilities cost. More to keep branches open than to send people home. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. That's just the fact. I think it was great that we kept we closed them, we opened them, we closed them, we opened them, kind of following the local government's lead on that. And then human resources, we paid everybody the whole time, maintained all their benefits. So for someone like me, I kept working every day. I didn't, other than my location, I didn't really know a difference. Ken was the same way. But if you were a teller and your branch was closed, we continued to pay you for your regularly scheduled hours, and we continued to support all of your benefits. So we really didn't lose. And we have about 800 employees. We only had one person who kind of abused that. But we continued from an HR perspective to treat our. I hope that answers the question.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Thank you very much. Anna Grather. Hello to all my Kansas City friends. I have been working for Seagate Technology for the last 2 years, and Seagate is in Longmont, Colorado. They are an international company. If you haven't heard of them, they make data storage. So if you have a hard drive, have a Seagate logo on it. They also make huge 20 terabyte disk drives for companies like Google and Apple and Dell. They also make large capacity storage that can take someone's data center and transfer it to the cloud. So all of that research and development is done at our Longmont, Colorado site. So half of our building is lab and half of it is office space. I'm going to walk you through two things. One is kind of a case study of how I got a recent project through the funding process. And the other is just some tools that I've used over the years to help justify projects and to put the information together that is needed by finance. So this first one is an oddity, COVID thrown in and a lot of unusual situations that aren't normal, but it kind of highlights how important it is to put your criteria together and have a good understanding of that. So this project actually started by my manager adding it to my budget and me not knowing what it meant. It just said lab, $500,000. He wasn't able to talk to me about it at the time because he was under a non-disclosure agreement, which is what Seagate uses when they're exploring scenarios that might impact employees or sites. And in this case, it was impacting both. So I saw that in there. I knew something was coming, but I didn't know what it was. I call those a drop-in project. I'm guessing no one else has ever had a drop-in project that just lands in their lap and becomes a #1 priority. So once he was able to talk to me about it, he did his best to scope it out without being able to talk to anyone on our team, anyone at our site. And of course, it wasn't fully fleshed out. So our first scenario was that we needed to really understand what the need truly was. And the situation is that our Minnesota site, we had 2 sites there, they were consolidating to 1. All the test equipment for the drives was being shipped to Longmont and very quickly. So we needed a home for it. We had no excess lab space. All of the lab side of our building, all of the compressed air, the chilled water, the clean room capacity, the 415 volt power was all on the lab side. None of it was on the office side. And the only space we had was on the office side. So that impacted the budget significantly, having to extend all of those utilities across. So we worked very closely with our business partner to establish not only what was needed, but the priority, because those priorities would be tested again and again through this process of what is the most important aspect of this project, what can you live without? So once we had that clarified and had developed a plan, we started getting pricing from vendors. And in the middle of that process, before we had ever put the project out to bid, we needed to put in our annual budget request to update that initial stab in the dark at the dollar amount. That, of course, was higher than it had been. We worked with our finance partners in Longmont as well as in California. Our finance group, the CFO is in California, the accounting department is in Asia, and then I have a partner here in Longmont that works with us on pretty much any of our data needs. So that they are actually included in the design process. They attend our design meetings and are very aware of what we're doing on a project. So we had that annual budget request, needed to update that. And as they worked it back through finance, we were told the Longmont site will not get an increase. So the business side needs to find the dollars somewhere for this. They worked it through and were able to carve it out from the overall closure of the site that was happening in Minnesota and transferred that budget into our Longmont budget. So again, working very closely with the business partners. I don't know how many different slide decks our business partner created to justify all of the testing that needed to be done, where he was going to put it, why it was needed, and also relying on facilities to support that in terms of what were the provisions being made and what was the cost going to be for that. So in the midst of this, COVID was they had to really look at cash on hand and at capital projections. And once we thought we were stable with our budget, we were asked to reprioritize and to essentially cut severely our overall capital budget. When we looked at that, we had to say no to some of our other business partners that had also requested projects from facilities. And the only way they were going to get that approved was to work it up to the very highest level in their organization. This one made it, and a couple of others did not. So again, being able to put together your reasoning and your justification for why a project is needed and what exactly those steps will be in a clear, concise manner was key to continuing on with this request. And as Ken mentioned, a lot of our other projects went on hold in our organization as well. Once we had the funding agreed upon and transferred over, then similar to what CapFed does, we put together a spreadsheet of all of the project costs, all of the things that would be needed for that. That was sent through for approval, both up the facilities side of the business into finance, as well as the business side. It needed approved on both levels at the very highest level of the company for a $1.2 million project, just because of the constraints of the economy during COVID. We got that approved finally, and thought we were good to go, and then started writing the purchase requisitions, and they got held up. And that was due to the release of capital funds. So as mentioned in the previous presentation, Seagate had to look across all of their commitments for dollars and when those commitments were going to happen. This project was slated to happen between March and May, and we ended up needing to go back to our major vendors on the project and ask them to renegotiate the terms so that they wouldn't bill us until July 6th, which was our next fiscal year. So all of that, the point in each of those steps is making sure that we have a well-crafted message, that the justification is there, and that everyone can see it from the perspective that they need in order to do their job. I'm going to go on now to some of the tools that I have used across the years, and they all help in justifying costs to within the facilities organization and within finance. So the first one example I have is a project justification. In my case, I just use a one-page sheet. It answers these basic 5 questions. And just as an example, this one is for generator controls. You may recall in Colorado, we had a lot of wildfires last summer and fall. 2 of the largest wildfires in the history of the state all happened during that time frame. And a 3rd fire happened near Longmont in October, and the evacuation zone came within 2 miles of our site. So our business continuity folks gathered together. What are we going to do if we have to evacuate, if we lose power, how long does the generator run? This building was not a critical site when it was built. The generators were only meant to transfer power. They were not meant to run for 7 days and hold the building. So if we were in evacuation mode, we didn't even have any view into those generators to see if they transferred, if they failed, if they were out of fuel. So this justification was put together, the problem being we don't have remote control for the generators. The supporting data that we put together is what's the make and model of those generators, how long have they been in place, what's their life expectancy, how much fuel do they need, how long is the runtime, and the issue that we had no status or fail indication. The urgency, in this case, it's just that there's an increased prevalence of wildfires in the Colorado area from what it was 20 years ago. And it's really up to other groups than that to say, yes, it's critical enough for us to proceed with that. And then the specific recommendation, we were going to add 2 controls to 2 generators with a web-based interface. And then the cost. We had quotes that we included with that. And in this case, it was an expense. That little sheet of paper has been of great help to me. And what I realized as I've been working with maintenance teams over the years is that most of the folks on the maintenance team completely know their equipment. They know what it can do. They know where the risks are. They know how it's going to fail, and they have a pretty good sense of when it's going to fail. But to get them to put it on paper is sometimes quite difficult. So my role has always been to pull that information together and compile it and be sort of the interpreter between the facilities maintenance team and the rest of the organization. Another tool that I use is an opportunity register. So in this case, it's about energy savings. You could use it for anything pretty much. We have a list of maybe 50 ideas that we're working through on how to save energy and be more efficient in our utilities. This is just a little snippet of a few of the things that I think are key in that register. So we identify the opportunity and then 1 to 5 scale. So what do we think the return on investment is? And sometimes there's not a whole lot of data, it's your gut feel. Sometimes we researched it a bit. So 5 being the highest score, we gave that a 4. How achievable is it? It's fairly easy in this case for LED lighting and controls. And then we could achieve it in 1 fiscal year. So we multiply those together to get a score, and anything over 60 we consider for execution. So this is just a tool that Seagate uses. I've used other types of tools in other organizations. It's just important that you have some things available to you to do some quick estimates and to help you prioritize. We also think about if there was capital required and what kind of savings it would generate. The next slide. We also use a property condition report, and my manager's in California. He has 4 sites in the US. A couple of years ago, we hired a third-party engineering company. They went to all of those sites over 1 summer with the same set of criteria, the same team, and they've developed a property condition report for each of those facilities. And that allowed us to really compare the needs and prioritize the needs. So the generator at one site might be in worse condition than a generator at another. It gave us an objective view of that, where we weren't trying to fight for our own stuff independently. So this is an example of one item that would be on there, seal code on the parking lot, and who's the owner of that project? Could we do it in-house? Was it budgeted or not? And when we thought we might do it. This included a list of maintenance type things, but it also identified ADA things that needed to be brought up to level or code issues that needed to be addressed, as well as regular maintenance and wear and tear. So having that third party input helped validate it. It helped us get an even view across sites. And it gave us a way to transfer that information onto, in our case, a 10-year capital and expense projection. So on the next slide, we can see a little snippet of our 10-year improvement plan. So we've taken that information plus others and put it across 10 years. I've just done a little snip of that. So a couple of examples: asphalt pavement replacement, it's 20 years old. I think it'll cost around close to $3 million. It would be considered an expense in this case, and we're going to do it in year 3. Parking lot lighting efficiency, we're going to change the heads on all the parking lot lights, which we have done, convert them to LED. It had a return on investment of about 1.5 years, and we spread it across 2 years. So this allows a snapshot view of capital versus expense spending. It allows you to note your justification and priority. And it also allows you to, if desired, spread your capital and expense dollars pretty evenly across those 10 years, or know where there are going to be big hits in years so that you can be partnering with finance on how you're going to address that. It's a pretty comprehensive list. It really covers everything from kitchen equipment to chillers to access control, and allows you to take a good broad look at what's happening in your facility. So those are some of the tools that I've used at Seagate and other places, always partnering with our finance team so that they're aware. They receive a copy of this 10-year improvement plan. And it just helps us as we make our case and partner with them. And that's it.
Okay, so always, Sam, interesting use of a John Deere tractor. I just felt like that needed to be said out loud. If anybody else has any questions for any of our panelists, please go ahead and unmute your microphone and go ahead and ask.